Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Graduate employees of Nigerian universities have for long enjoyed a head start over their counterparts from the polytechnics in employment matters. Public perception of these two sets of graduates has also been shaped by an unspoken belief that the university remains the ultimate conveyor belt of the nation's choicest materials for political and economic leadership. However, with last Tuesday's passage of a bill for an act to abolish this dichotomy, many are wondering whether this controversy will now be laid to rest for good. Joining us now to look at the likely benefits and disadvantages of this development in equal measure is Dr. Adagbo Onoja, a lecturer in the Department of Political Science and Diplomacy, Veritas University, Abuja. Dr. Onoja, welcome to the program. Hello, good morning.
Morning, thank you.
How are you?
I'm hearing you loud and clear.
Oh, very good. That's great. Now, let me ask you, how important is this bill abolishing the dichotomy between HND degree holders and BSc holders within the Nigerian system? And have you been able to take a look at some of the details of the bill so that you can share with us, what the details are beyond the principle that it establishes?
Well, I think it's too early to be categorical about what the importance might be. We need to see it go into action before we can be clear about the direction it is taking Nigeria. But I think if you look at the details, in summary, you could say it's basically at the level of employment, not at the level of content of the curricula underpinning each of the programs involved, the ones in the polytechnic, the ones in the universities. So basically, it's at the level of employment. They will be treated equally in terms of entry point and the progression regarding promotion and the associated benefits. Now, if you operate at that level, you could say, well, there's a psychological relief in the sense that the sort of rating gap that existed before does not apply anymore once the law goes into effect. But that's not really where the most strategic issue would lie, because the question about employment, entry points, and so on, do not fundamentally address what universities are supposed to do, what polytechnics are supposed to do, as originally conceived and had been the policy in Nigeria. So we need time to look at, to be able to establish categorically whether there's something, whether this is a breakthrough or a breakdown.
If you think legislation will work where a presidential directive did not, because in April 2018, Head of Service for the Federation, Mrs. Winifred Oyo-Ita, issued a circular abolishing this dichotomy between HND and BSc, and no change happened.
Well, a presidential directive is just a directive, it's not a law. But now, I think we are close to it. We're dealing with a law and what comes thereafter. But the point in both of them is that they are basically addressing the question from the point of view of entry point into public service, progression on the job, the benefits that come with that. Now, they are not talking about the content of university programs and the content of the polytechnics. Are they also harmonizing at that level? Is it possible to achieve harmony at that level? I think that's the gap. I think that's where the problem is coming from.
No, well, I think the point she made is very pertinent. You recall that even as far back as 2006, there was a white paper, a government white paper on the consolidation of emoluments within the public sector. And then later in 2016, In 2014, the Jonathan administration set up a 12-member interministerial technical committee on this same issue, and certain decisions were taken to abolish the dichotomy. At the end of the day, 14 HND holders who were civil servants, they had to go to the industrial court. Now, what is the guarantee this time around that even when you have this law in place, that it will be implemented? Because in the past, various measures had been taken, the most recent being the one that Tundun just referred to. What is the guarantee in a country where, laws can be dead laws because the authorities may not respect them?
Well, nobody can give any guarantee that a particular law will be implemented. I think the legitimacy of the law will determine whether the law will find its level or will not find its level. But the fundamental thing is not whether the law will work or not work. What the parties to this misunderstanding of the essence of universities and polytechnics, I don't think they have addressed the main requirement that will make it work. They are looking at a major manifestation, which is the problem of entry point differential. But how did the entry point differential arise? You cannot solve a problem by just merely looking at it as a problem. Where is the problem coming from? I think the debate, which is a very long debate now, has not looked at that dimension. Rather, what has happened, you have very powerful lobby groups that goes there and says, oh, okay, these guys spend 4 years each in their program, so what's the basis for the differential? They have not looked at the fundamental question. And if you ask me about the fundamental question, I have a response to that.
So I will ask you, in broad terms, most people would distinguish a university from a polytechnic by saying a university will teach you theory, a polytechnic will teach you the technical aspects, but what to you is the distinction? And do you see Nigeria, do you see this as a stepping stone to what the United Kingdom did 27 years ago when all polytechnics were abolished and they all became universities?
I mean, any country can decide whether to abolish universities or convert existing polytechnics to universities or vice versa. Those are technical issues which politicians can always decide, but always reflecting national interest in terms of what they are to achieve when you convert them or when you regrade them. But I'm not the sort of person who would say polytechnics are inferior or universities are superior. No, they are not superior or inferior. What happens there is that they are simply different. And different does not speak to superiority or inferiority. The issue on the table is universities have certain things that are unique about them. A typical university is scholastic in essence. Yeah, you can't take that away from it. You mentioned, you called it theory. Well, I wouldn't call it theory. I think about it in terms of fundamental questions about human existence. What is the truth? Because unless you can establish truth, you cannot make progress, even in science. So universities have a tendency to be scholastic about it, to find out, to establish claims, the truth or otherwise of claims. Polytechnics, on the other hand, are not against claims, but they are more likely to be concerned with problem solving, the technological fix at the level of national diploma or higher national diploma. So there is that fundamental difference in terms of direction and essence. So coming now to try to harmonize their products is a bit contradictory when you look at this. I don't think anybody will start protesting if you make a polytechnic engineer to earn salary that you consider appropriate to his training and experience and orientation and capabilities. But you can't, on that basis, now come to the conclusion that universities and polytechnics are the same thing. No, they are not. They have different roles to play in any properly organized national economy. Of course, it depends eventually on how a nation decides to mobilize universities and polytechnics.
Well,
what universities are supposed to do are not the same thing as what polytechnics are supposed to do. So where is this notion about harmonizing coming from?
Well, I mean, I think the big issue really is about workplace equality and, harmonizing emoluments, benefits.
No, workplace equality cannot be a product of strict considerations, and protest and lobby.
Well,
workplace equality must be informed by the nature of training, the orientation of training that you have brought to the job.
Well, I mean, the HND holders, they've been talking about workplace equality, and they've been protesting about discrimination, which they say is not allowed under Section 42 of the 1999 Constitution. But we see a trend now. Some of our polytechnics are now being converted to universities. Only yesterday, there was a bill that was passed by the Senate over the, I think, Yaba Polytechnic. Yes, I think Yaba Polytechnic, which is now supposed to become City Polytechnic. No, not Yaba Polytechnic, Yaba Tech or something, right? Yes. Yeah, but Yaba Polytechnic, I think I'm correct. Yeah. You know, there's a plan to turn it into the City University in Lagos. And also you have in some other states, like Ogun State, where Moshood Abiola Polytechnic is now Moshood Abiola University. Do you think that this dichotomy is what is responsible for the lobby for some of these polytechnics, you know, to be converted to universities? And do you think it's a good thing, considering the original objectives of setting up these, polytechnics?
I think the most proper thing to do is to argue that all these are manifestations of the confusion in the larger society. I mean, if you could go to Polytechnic and make a name in history by coming out with something that's a product of your training there, there's no limit to that. You could equally go to the university and make that. Or you can be a graduate and become an armed robber. Yeah, these are not the guarantees. You don't get any guarantees that by going to the Polytechnic or the university, you are already. But what I'm saying is that there are principles that underline each of the two. And to come to the workplace and then start comparison at that level when the ideology behind Polytechnic and universities are different is a major mistake we are making. It's because we don't have a functional economy, we tend to overrate certain things and downplay certain things. That's why the Polytechnic graduates are feeling inferior. It is the orientation in Nigeria that creates that this thing. It has no foundation in the, there's no argument about the importance of having Polytechnic. So waking up and say, all right, let's convert Ogun State Polytechnic to a university, rename it, but did you redesign the curriculum? Did you infuse the scholastic essence into that arrangement? If you didn't do that, the name would be there, but the products will not have that background. They will still lack it. So this do not address the question.
So what will address it? Because
you cannot in Nigeria alone merge.
Carry on.
Yeah, I'm hearing you.
No, I want you to finish, please. I didn't realize you were still speaking.
Yeah?
Please finish your sentence.
You were saying something.
No. I'm saying I'm saying it is wrong to wake up and rename institutions without changing the fundamental essence of the institutions. If you call Yaba Polytechnic, which has already made a name, you simply change it and let it now become university. You erase that institutional memory. It can still remain a polytechnic and award degrees, but you must make provision and reorientate the broad place into a degree awarding institution. The name that will not matter. There are polytechnics in the UK, for example, that issue degrees, and they have the facilities for that. The products of that institution are oriented in a different direction from a very technical perception of orientation in knowledge, and they serve the purpose for which the name exists. So why are we confusing the names with the fundamental principles and the and the orientation of the institutions that we are talking about.
So what you're describing is a superficial and misdirected effort to cure what is not even a problem in the first case. But how do we cure this?
Thank you very much.
Yes. How do we cure this wrong perception that has taken hold that a university is superior to a polytechnic? Because going back to the bill seeks to fine people out of this prejudice that they might hold. There's a 5 million naira fine to be applied for corporations, a 1 million naira fine to be applied to individuals who run foul of the law when it becomes a law, if it becomes a law. But what do we need to do to address the proper standing of polytechnics as equal but different universities and not in need of an upgrade?
Yeah, what we need to do, we cannot isolate that problem from the larger, from a holistic overview of Nigeria as a whole. It must come as a component of a national strategy for reviving Nigeria, all right? And within that national strategy, there is a role for education. Within the section on role for education, you have role for universities and other categories of higher institutions, so that you don't confuse a college of education with a polytechnic. You don't confuse a polytechnic with a university. Universities produce ideas. Ideas reproduce themselves, and they take the society from where it is to where it ought to be. And that's what a national strategy talks about, where a country ought to be from where it is at the moment. So polytechnics are more oriented to problem-solving institutions in the sense that they respond to specific challenges, they study them, and they develop models. Okay? So a lot of the time, they utilize outcomes from the universities. As I said earlier, this is not in a restrictive sense. You can rename a polytechnic, provided what it needs, it can also produce the graduates. So the orientation, the difference, the differentials that they are fighting is just a manifestation of the problem. They need to go back to where the society started getting it wrong. And that's where the problem can be solved. So that the feeling, so people could opt to go to the polytechnic as a deliberate choice based on what they want to do with their life. In any case, it's not everyone who is inclined to a reflective sort of education. Some people are much, much better in technical education, in handling, producing things out of materials. And for them, the most important thing is the outcome of what they have done and the training they've got. So you don't need to put all such people into universities, which is a bit more about ideas, about what research. People call theories. Yeah, so why do we, okay, even within the universities, they are not the same. There are community colleges, they are not compared to research universities. So then if you solve this problem of polytechnic university differentials, then you later, at a point in time, you will start confronting distinction between community colleges, university colleges, and research universities. And the research universities are not the same with community colleges or university colleges.
Well, thank you very much.
So at what point are we going to stop?
Yes, please go ahead. Hello?
No, at what point are we going to yeah, I'm listening to you. I'm hearing you.
You were saying something. You were saying at what point are we going to?
Yeah, I was saying at what point are we going to stop this differentiation? It's just like identity. At the national level, you talk about different ethnic identities, regional identities. You come down to the region, you find more complex identity configuration. You go down to your religion, it's even worse. You go down to the family, you find complexity. Then you go down to yourself. You find that a human being is not an integrated self. Human being has several levels of identity, each of which comes up depending on what is at stake, what's on the table, what's to be fought, what's the advantage in anticipation. So also, if you go to the educational sector, now the one we are dealing with is university polytechnic. When you have finished with that, or when you hopefully finish with that, you will find other differential that you have to deal with. So none is more important than the other. What is at issue is, what does Nigeria want to get from collection of schools that are that you call polytechnics? What does Nigeria want to get at this level of her development from the collection of schools that you call universities and down the line? That's what is important. And this is never static. At some point, polytechnics may become more important. At some other point, universities might become more privileged. That's what Nigeria ought to know, not this ad hoc adjustment along the line.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Adagbo Onoja. Your point is very clear. You know, for you, it's not just about emolument. It's about, you know, the philosophical foundations of the idea of the polytechnic and the idea of the university, and how we have a proper alignment, you know, between the curriculum and the marketplace, and, you know, the other problems that we have within the Nigerian society and economy. We thank you very much for honoring an invitation to shed more light on this issue of dichotomy between two different kinds of degrees. It's time now for a short break. When we return, we shall be joined by the spokesman of the All Progressives Congress in Lagos, Joe Igbokwe. Stay with us.